Welcome back to another edition of the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast you can find on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Zach Wolchuk alongside the Super Bowl winning scout, Brian Broaddus, 2/5 of the G-Bag Nation, which you can catch on the Odyssey app as well and on 105.3 The Fan, your home of Dallas Cowboys football. Brian, I just saw this 31 years ago today. Jimmy Johnson left the Dallas Cowboys. Now, for you, you might have a unique point of view and perspective on this because you were competing against Jimmy Johnson and the Dallas Cowboys. When this day comes up, I don't know how often you really think about this, but do you have any memories of like shock or what was going through your mind in the football world when this news broke?
Yeah, wow, 31 years ago today. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We were competing against the Cowboys, the first 5 years, 6 years. I mean, their Super Bowl run when they were winning those championship games, the team was outstanding. Jimmy Johnson, a big part of that. You kind of were like thinking, wow, what could happen to break all that up? What was the cause? And we were always scrambling. We had a good handle on how to beat San Francisco. We never had a good handle on how to beat Jimmy Johnson's Dallas Cowboys. Just never did. Well coached, always prepared. Players were outstanding. In big games, they were just so much better than we were. And you just wonder how like something that was going along that well could completely come apart, unravel as it did. And, it's still, as you brought up 31 years ago, that there's still questions why, and I'm sure people out there listening to our podcast are thinking, well, it's Jerry. It's Jerry. Jerry's the one that did this. And yeah, Jerry had a big part of this. And, both guys have huge egos. And, it was one of those things. But if you kind of remember the story of Jimmy Johnson, he never stays anywhere really too long. He's kind of a 5-6 year guy, and then he kind of moves on to the next challenge in his life. Now, he stayed at Fox Broadcasting a long time just to retire here recently. But as far as his coaching, he was kind of a guy that was interested in building a program, moving on, and then getting to the next job. And, that's, he had some ideas of things. I mean, he flirted with Jacksonville at the time, was an expansion. He flirted with some different opportunities, and then the Dolphin one became available for him. He took that for a few years and then he moved on. So, kind of his MO, but really surprising that two guys that had so much success together parted the way they did.
Well, the free agency way of things has kind of slowed down a little bit for the Cowboys. We're really just kind of all full steam ahead for the draft. I did see one former Cowboy this morning as we're recording this on a Wednesday, Trey Lance. It looks like the Saskatchewan Roughriders have added Trey Lance, the former number 3 overall pick of the 2021 draft. Of course, the Cowboys trading a 4th for him to their negotiation list of this week. So Lance's father, Carlton, former Saskatchewan Roughrider cornerback. So I guess there's a little bit of connection here with the teams. But
sure,
is this a surprise? Like Trey Lance already looking at maybe exiting the NFL? Maybe the interest wasn't there, and he's looking to try and continue his career in the Canadian Football League. Do you think the Cowboys should have maybe kicked the tires on bringing him back as a backup?
Yeah, it's always surprising. And I guess it proves if he ends up in Canada that this kind of closes the circle then of a team like the 49ers thought as much as they did of him, gave some the draft capital they did to draft him, to get him there, to work with him, and then to move on. Dallas saying like, well, wait a minute, we had the top of a 2nd round grade on him. We kind of liked him too, maybe not as much as San Francisco liked him, but Dallas gave a 4th round pick to San Francisco to get that opportunity to work with him. And unfortunately, it looks like to me that there are probably some teams that didn't covet him as much. Now, maybe in the drafting process they did, but now they're starting to see, the play at San Francisco, his inability to stay healthy at the time. Dallas, teams can go back and look at all the preseason tape they want, and maybe the Cowboys themselves of saying, and with Brian Schottenheimer is like, listen, not interested here anymore. Everything was all positive. The talk was positive. Mike McCarthy, when he talked about Trey, but maybe there were some things behind the scenes that we didn't see. Maybe those practices weren't great. Maybe the meetings weren't great. They talk about Trey Lance being a really bright guy. I don't know if that would be the issue, that can he pick things up, or is the fact that Trey Lance is who Trey Lance is. And we all in this period, and I know you and I are going through it right now, and I've been evaluating quarterbacks, and it's really you're trying your best to get a firm understanding of what you're potentially getting into. I think this is why you have so many misses with the quarterbacks, is because you got people like the 49ers that absolutely love Trey Lance. You got people like the Cowboys that absolutely love Trey Lance. And then there's other teams now sitting out there, they're going, wow, we like Trey Lance too, but fortunately for us, we didn't have to give up the draft capital or the financial commitment to see if Trey Lance could play or not. We're going to evaluate the tape, and it looks like that he can't play. So, unfortunate. I did think that maybe that Dallas would try and kick the tires on a kind of a veteran minimum deal or an incentive kind of a thing, but they would rather, it sounds like that they would rather move on and see if they could do something in this draft, whether there's a lot of whispers and speculation, and something we need to kind of keep an eye on, Zach, is you and I like to watch where these coaches go for workouts. Mm-hmm. If you look at where Brian Schottenheimer is going, I believe he's with the Texas workout. And Texas has got a lot of players, but Texas also has Quinn Ewers.
Sure do.
He's going to Ohio State. They have Will Howard there. Mm-hmm. He's making these trips. Around to see. He's going to Oregon Pro Day. Okay. Oregon's got a lot of players there, but they also have Dylan Gabriel there. Now, right. We're talking about guys that aren't named Shedeur Sanders and, not named, Ward. We're talking about guys that are probably somewhere between third, fourth, and fifth round prospects. So maybe as we focus on their position coaches doing stuff, maybe Brian Schottenheimer's going around and getting an idea on these down the line quarterbacks, if the Cowboys in fact are interested, which I think they absolutely are. I don't think you could go into the season with just saying, okay, Will Greer's our guy. I think they would like to add somebody that potentially is better than Will Greer.
Yeah, we had this conversation on the draft show yesterday. Like, at what point in the draft would you look to take a quarterback? And I mean, look, you've been in those rooms. I'm sure if you fall in love with a guy, there's probably not a point that's necessarily too early. I know just from the outside looking in, I'm just looking at all the holes on this roster, and you've committed to Dak Prescott. He's your guy. I don't know that you have the luxury personally to go before you got multiple picks in the fifth round. But I guess, hey, if you go and work out a Will Howard and he's sitting there pick 76 in the third round, or a Quinn Ewers from Texas, for example, or maybe Jalen Milroe slides a little bit and you're just tempted by the athlete that he is and think, you know what, if we could get that arm kind of fine-tuned a little bit, there is so much talent there. Let's take a risk. I mean, is it worth it? Do you think the Cowboys might go as early as day 2 on a quarterback?
I think that, they like to talk about personnel being a 24/7 job, and they have to do their due diligence on these quarterbacks. I know there's a lot of people that are listening to this podcast saying, why, but the one thing Dallas has proven they're willing to do is they paid their quarterback. He is one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, and they did what they did with Trey Lance. They threw a 4th-round pick at Trey Lance. Let's go back to some previous drafts under previous administrations. The whole thing with Connor Cook, Paxton Lynch, they're always, even going back to when I was involved in personnel, always hunting quarterbacks. And so, they've been very fortunate with Dak Prescott. They believe they had Jamil Showers. They believe they had their Dak Prescott and Jamil Showers. I mean, sometimes just throwing something at it or having a plan or and I say the word plan, but people probably, they don't have a plan, Brian. They're just, but they're hunting quarterbacks. And so I wouldn't put it past the Cowboys to be looking at one of these guys in the third, fourth, fifth round. I mean, they don't have a four, but somehow, some way they get a fourth back, or, or say the third round or the fifth round, whatever. It wouldn't surprise me one bit, because the history tells you they hunt quarterbacks. I mean, early 2000s, we hunted quarterbacks because we lost Troy Aikman. You had to, now how did we go about it? We went about it really the wrong way. But under Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones, they've made commitments to trying to find quarterbacks. And I could say, I think Brian Schottenheimer, on these trips that he's going on, there are some guys that are considered right now backup quarterbacks that potentially could be starters one day. And you mentioned the holes. Zach, I'm with you, man. I think there's a lot of holes to fill. I think free agency helped them in some ways. If they would have sat there and done absolutely nothing like they did last year, then I would have said that there's no way in hell that you draft a quarterback or even think about drafting a quarterback. But what I'm looking at right now is they're still going to have a lot of holes even after this draft. They're still going to have to find a way in college free agency, even after the draft. Jerry and Steven's willingness to spend, six figures on players after the draft. Some teams just try and kind of fill out the rosters. The Cowboys try and get those guys off the draft board. Mm-hmm. The tight ends from Minnesota last year. They try, and the first thing they do in college free agency is go after. Maybe some guys came through on Dallas Day that we don't know about. They're that are on their board, that they know they have a workout on, they really like. See, I still think even after the draft, they're going to have some holes. Will it be as many? Probably not, but there's still going to be some holes. I don't think picking a quarterback should deter you. You're still going to have holes. That's just kind of how I look at it. Maybe you won't have as many, but if the quarterback is better than, and there's a lot of third and fourth round guys I know on your board that you really, really like more than a quarterback. Mm-hmm. And if that's a guy, if a wide receiver or a nickel corner or a defensive tackle is in that mix, over a quarterback, sure. But I think they're hunting the potential backup right now in this draft.
And this does, as we're watching the quarterbacks, it kind of feels like a great draft to get your backup guy. I think you've got a lot of long-term backup quarterbacks in this class. Now, maybe to your point, hey, I don't think people were looking at Brock Purdy as a franchise guy necessarily. And then now look what's happened there. Same thing with Dak Prescott. If people knew that Dak or a Tom Brady or some of these guys that go on day 3 are going to turn into that, they're not hanging around till the 4th, 6th, Mr. Irrelevant. They're going in the first round. But, this draft does have a lot of guys. Seth Hennigan, who's going to be a Dallas guy Dallas Day guy, went to Memphis, 4-year starter, played a lot of football. That's something we've talked has translated well. These guys that got the snaps, got the opportunity to play a long time, set records there at Memphis, 6'3", 215, big kid, has a good arm, played at Denton Ryan here locally. Curtis Rourke from Indiana, another interesting kid, 6'4", 220. I brought up Kyle McCord, who I liked quite a bit. Really impressed me, much more than I thought when I got to see him live at the Shrine Bowl workouts. This is a physically impressive kid. They can spin it, has good arm talent. I love the adversity that he played through last year after being kicked out of Ohio State, basically. Went to Syracuse, helped turn around that program. So there's a lot of good storylines and a lot of kids that played a lot of college football that can come in and help you as the backup quarterback that you can bring in and develop here. This is a solid class for backup quarterbacks.
No, you're absolutely right. And, I know that I have to do Tyler Shook. He's a guy coming up. I know Kyle McCord is a guy I have to study. You mentioned Rourke from Indiana. There's several guys that kind of fit that role. And, I know people are freaking out hey, they can't do this. They can't do this again. No, you can do this. The whole idea is to add talent as you see fit. I would rather take a chance on a quarterback than I would maybe take a chance on a guy that I'm, maybe as I mentioned, a linebacker or somebody like that I just don't feel as good about. Man, some of these quarterbacks, I was watching Dylan Gabriel this morning from Oregon. Feel good about Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel's a 5'11" guy, and he doesn't have a lot of power to his body. But, he ends up in a situation like with Miami where they get the ball out quick and they kind of understand how to work with a smaller quarterback like that. There are places for these quarterbacks to end up. And just because you pay Dak Prescott doesn't mean you can't try and have the best backup quarterback you can in the league. Look what the Commanders did to you in the final week of the season.
Sure.
Their starting quarterback was not very good that game. And all of a sudden, Marcus Mariota comes in the game, in a game that they wanted to win. Marcus Mariota went in there as a backup quarterback and got a win. So I don't think you can just sit there and say, because you have Dak Prescott, that you can't address the quarterback situation. I would much rather take a flyer on a quarterback than I would take a flyer on a guard from some directional school that's not going to play except end up on the practice squad. I don't think there's any point of that. I mean, if there are quarterbacks on that board that are comparable talent-wise to the players you're talking about, third, fifth round, wherever, I think you owe it to yourself to make that determination, say having this guy on our team is worth it for us right now, especially with some of the health concerns that Dak had, of course, last year. That's unfortunate, but 2 years ago, you've got an older quarterback. You need to kind of think about protecting yourself a little bit there. I don't know if Will Greer's that guy. I'm not going to sit there and stake me winning games on Will Greer. I'll take a chance on some of these guys. As you mentioned, a lot of these quarterbacks have a lot of experience. Quinn Ewers, a lot of experience playing. Dylan Gabriel, a lot of experience playing. Milroe, a lot of experience playing. There's guys in this draft. Howard from Ohio State, a lot of experience playing in big damn games and winning big damn games. So please don't be closed-minded about adding a position just because you think, because you have the highest paid quarterback. Him sitting there is insurance if something happens to your highest paid quarterback, which 2 of the last 3 years, something's happened to him.
100%. I think that's one where Ty should go to the quarterback. There's no more important position. And if I've got guys,
if you got the right one. If you got the right one,
and that's part of their evaluation, and they get to be around these guys. And you're right. If they find a guy that they like a lot, why not? I don't think people remember 4th round. Cowboys didn't even take Dak with that first pick in the 4th. They took Charles Tapper, the defensive end out of Oklahoma. So they did go another position out of quarterback. Nobody remembers that guy, but they do remember Dak Prescott. You hit at that quarterback.
Absolutely.
That's going to be very, very valuable. No question about it. All right, let's keep with the pro days. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, Brian, so Texas had their pro day yesterday. Your LSU Tigers having their pro day today. Certainly a lot of talent going on there. We've got Boise State with Ashton Genty. He's going to have his pro day today as well. Pittsburgh, the Dakota schools are having it. Ohio State having their pro day today. And there is so much talent that you can go and watch at Ohio State, where you're talking about the offensive linemen with Simmons and the guard there in Jackson, the wide receivers in Igbuka, the runners in Henderson and Judkins, the defensive players. They got Burke at corner. They got Simon. They've got a linebacker to go and watch. They've got the defensive tackle in Williams. It's an embarrassment of riches there, really, with Ohio State. But yesterday, Texas had their pro day. The big concern for me, my guy was in a walking boot, Brian. Alfred Collins. He was in a walking boot. Now, I reached out immediately to Tommy Yarish, part of the draft show, DallasCowboys.com. I said, Tommy, give me some good news. I need it. I need it on Alfred Collins. I can't have something wrong with him. He said everyone was pretty buttoned up about this. They wouldn't give away too much, but typically it's just precautionary. So he doesn't think it's anything serious, but I'm sure the Cowboys and anyone else that's interested in Alfred Collins, the big man defensive tackle out of Texas, whom I love, is going to figure out more information on that Matthew Golden had himself
Yeah.
a good day. Jaden Blue ran himself a blazing 40. Andrew Makuba, we found out the safety is going to be a 30 visit. And Quinn, it seemed like, had himself a pretty good day. Great in the short to intermediate game. A little inconsistent on the move with the deep ball is one of the things that I had heard. The one bummer was Cam Williams, the right tackle there at Texas. He did not work out. He's lost a lot of weight. But Cam Williams is a guy I really thought would have benefited going back to Texas another year, Brian. He is locally out of Duncanville. For those of you that are listening in the DFW area, you probably got to see him play there in high school. But takeaways, maybe some thoughts on Collins or anything else from the Texas Pro Day. I loved hearing Makuba is going to be a 30-day visit.
No, absolutely. And that's encouraging because I don't think they're completely married to Hooker and to Wilson. We see what they did, with Thomas and Bell, with the tender offers and the offers to get them back on. I applaud them for looking at their safety situation. I'll say this about Collins: anytime you're in a walking boot and it's buttoned up with the information, that makes me nervous. I need to get on the horn and trying to figure out if there's something that came up at the combine that we need to know about. That man is 332 pounds. And if he has a foot problem, it's going to make it very difficult for me to draft a guy that big with feet problems. You know what I'm saying? And so if we're talking about those fractures and hairline things and all that, or we're dealing with something bad, toes, ankle, those things aren't good for a guy that's 332 pounds. So it's a guy. It's a third rounder on my board. I've got him right in that mix. I know you probably like him a little bit better, and you know what? You might be absolutely right about his situation. Excuse me. I have him in the fourth round I have him with Collins with West from Indiana, Jordan Phillips, and Caldwell from Oregon. Kind of my big one technique guys. I think you might have him in the third round yourself.
Yeah,
but
I've got him in the third.
Yeah, but that's probably where he needs to be. But yeah, that's a concern. If he's in a boot and there's some type of, we're dealing with foot issues, that's a big red flag for me for that.
I saw that and was my heart sunk. I was like, no, please, everything be okay. But hopefully we get good news there. But you're right, a big man like that. You see him in a walking boot. It's like, oh goodness, we've really got to assess this one here. When it comes to pro days, we had a little bit of this conversation yesterday, though. But for those that haven't gotten to attend, and I've actually never even been to a pro day either, what are some of the things? Because you've gotten to see the combine, but some of these guys, I guess, don't work out at the combine. So maybe now this is the first time you're going to get to see them work out. What are you looking for as a scout when you go to these pro days? Well,
pro days are actually pretty interesting because what happens is, as a guy who ran a draft in '98, I was always interested to see who was coming to the workout. Who am I competing for or against for these players? And so, I would show up and I would kind of write down what teams I saw. If a team had a position coach, I think that's really, really big. If a team's sending a position coach in there to work out a player, that's usually trying to kind of figure some things out. They send the coordinators in there. That's another good sign. Head coaches showing up is a good sign. But a pro day is generally what I got the most out of. Yeah, you get your numbers. A lot of these guys will do the verticals and they'll do the broad jump. They'll do the workout, but they won't do like the 20 shuttle. You could see the defensive backs and doing that, or the receivers. The 3-cone drill, you get an idea of that for some lateral agility and quickness. The 40 is always a big thing. The 10 splits, the 20 splits are a big thing. Maybe bench press, maybe that's something that, you didn't see. Maybe they didn't bench at the combine, but all of a sudden you see a guy jump down there and give you 28 quality reps. You're like, okay, that checks that box out. But those workouts that the coaches do at the end, when the coaches put them through, I remember a guy named Tim Krumrie, who probably, if you go and you're old enough, you'll remember Tim Krumrie. Cincinnati Bengals. He broke his leg in a Super Bowl, terrible injury. But Tim Krumrie, when he was a coach with the defensive line coach with the Bengals, used to take off his shirt and wrestle with the defensive lineman. He would literally wrestle. Like he would, grapple, like hands on shoulders, pull, push, move around, try and throw him down, have them slap him. He would do things that, and he would try and agitate the guys he was working out. And he would see how competitive they really are. Like, okay, old man, you're slapping me right now. I'm going to throw you on the ground. And I always loved when Tim Krumrie was there, because Tim would get a guy to quit. He would, you could tell there would be guys that would battle him, and he would like, oh, okay, we're good. Tim knowing that he was, about to get thrown on his ass. But then he would make guys quit. And you're like, that was kind of a mental note to me. Like, man, it got a little tough on this kid and he quit. So it's just a mental note that you make. But these coaches do a really good job of putting these guys through workouts. And for example, Quinn Ewers plays shotgun a lot. Cam Ward, a lot of shotgun. We saw in his workout the other day that he played under center quite a bit. They had a segment where he was playing under center. Matter of fact, I heard Quinn Ewers, the first snap he took under shotgun yesterday, he dropped the snap. So you're like, oh, okay. But that just goes to show you there are things that these coaches can do to these players to give you an even better understanding of who they are. Like I say, the Tim Krumrie wrestling, I love that. Because those players would like punch him, and he took it. Like he gets slapped by a player and hit in the face, and he took it, and you're like, okay, these guys are competitive. And that's something that you kind of get not only the numbers, but you get that side of that little hands-on work that these coaches give them.
I love that, right? Like what makes these guys tick? Do you love football? How competitive are you? What is your breaking point? Like,
sure,
that stuff is certainly when we're trying to like break down, the tape, we get that, but getting a feel for the actual person, big in these evaluations as well. I did see that the Cowboys reportedly ran defensive tackle Cam Horsley's workout at Boston College. So BC defensive tackle Cam Horsley may be a guy that we should dig into, could be on the Cowboys radar as well as they're hunting some defensive tackles. But you're right, keeping an eye on these coaches, who's going where. That's big. That can give you a little tip off like, hey, they might like this dude. We might need to be paying a little bit more attention coming around. One thing before we get to some questions, we were kicking around Daniel Jeremiah's idea that he said, man, I miss the days of the Cowboys being aggressive, wheeling and dealing. Let's move up in the draft. The more we've talked about trades, trading up, trading back, I think you're 100% right, Brian. I don't think these teams are going to be getting value. It seems like everybody's wanting to bail. Everyone wants to bail out of their picks. If you have all these teams that are trying to bail, it's going to water down the market. They're not going to end up getting exactly what they're wanting to get in terms of value of moving back. Tennessee is like, yeah, you want to come up and get Cam Ward? We might be open for business. We also might love him. You got to go up your offer. Good luck there. Cleveland might be trying to bail. The Giants, the Patriots, they could be trying to bail. If you're the Cowboys, I'm moving up to try and go get Travis Hunter if I could. But the price has got to be one where now I'm winning the deal.
Sure.
And they might fall into a situation where this could happen. Is
Absolutely.
it worth it, or is there another player for you? Travis Hunter could end up being two birds, one stone. If I've got a good plan, he can play corner for me. He can play wide receiver for me. That's exciting. That'll get the fan base fired up. Let's go. How do you feel about Travis Hunter? Maybe another player. Mason Graham's a guy we haven't really discussed about moving up for, and he could be a very, very big help in the interior as a one tech that can also give you some pass rush ability. I know he's a Michigan guy, but he's not the same. Okay, Cowboy fans, don't panic over a Michigan defensive lineman. Wink Martindale was running these guys in a very different system last year.
Yeah, and Wink Martindale, as watching this quarterback tape, did a really nice job on Will Howard and did a really nice job on Jalen Milroe. The two games I watched Michigan play, there's a pro coach going after those guys. My gut feeling is that the value, I think there's some ability to be had. I know talking to Daniel Jeremiah, and I brought this up on our show. I asked him, I said, hey, is this something you're hearing, or is this you just, having fun? And he goes, no, I just know that I just know that the Giants at 3 and New England at 4 are interested in moving. And so, it's not something that Daniel Jeremiah said, yeah, I was talking to X scout and he told me this, or talking to this scout or whatever. And he just, Dallas had one time, Mo Claiborne was the big jump that we remember before. But yeah, if teams are not going to get value for their picks, and I think I'm preparing myself for that, and I can't get mad at the Cowboys if they trade back, but I do know this. One of the reasons why I want value for my pick, I worked hard to put together a second round board. If you're just going to say, okay, well, I'll give you a third, and there's people out there. I know that I've interacted with some people on Twitter and other platforms like, well, just take your third and move on, Brian. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, my pick's worth a second round pick. I worked hard to put my second round board together. I would like to take my second round players are better than my third round players. I would like the opportunity, if you would like my pick, to pick a second round player here. I don't have to take your pick and just move on. I don't have to accept, I've got second round guys. If my pick is worth a second round move up trade chart value to you and to me, let's talk about that. I'm not interested in just taking a third and moving on with my day. There's a reason why I have those players in the second, and there's a reason why I have those players in the third. But I'm preparing myself to not get value. Now, the Travis Hunter stuff, let me ask you a question, Zach.
Yeah.
And this is a question I would love to ask every NFL team. This would be a one question. Is Travis Hunter really your best wide receiver prospect or your best cornerback prospect on your board? I wonder how many teams have him as the best wide receiver prospect or the best corner on their board. That would be fascinating to me, because it sounds like to me that there's some whispers that might not be the case, that he might not be the best wide receiver prospect on some teams' board, or he might not be the best cornerback on some teams' boards. He's a hell of a player. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to stir things up here. Sure. I would just like to know how many teams of the 32 teams, whether you have him listed at corner or wide receiver, is he the best player at that position?
Yeah, I've got him at number 2 wide receiver. I put him at number 1 corner, but I'm
fighting have a little doubt about that.
We all do. With myself.
We all do.
And it's because there's 3 guys in this draft because I watched Kyle Williams, the Washington State kid, and I get the love there. And 2 years ago, gosh, he made life hard on Travis Hunter. And if you look at Ayomanor, the wide receiver from Stanford, he made life hard on Travis Hunter.
And there
McMillan.
There was a series or two. Yeah, there was a series or two. McMillan really ate up some of the others, but he went after. There's times where you watch Hunter and I'm like, is he really the best corner on the, is he, or are we giving him his props because he lines up and he plays 100 snaps a game in all conditions? He's a Heisman Trophy winner. The thing that would worry me a little bit, I think the wide receiver stuff makes a lot of sense for me. He's 185 pounds. I worry about that a little bit at corner, but I would love to ask teams, is he the best corner on your board or is he the best receiver on your board? And I wonder how many teams would say, well, no, I've got, like you have some doubt here, and you have, with the other one, it's not like wide receiver, you have a clear path that no, he's number 2 on my board. Mm-hmm. So the trade up for him, if in fact you feel like he's the best player, you might be able to go get that for some undervalue. You might, if the Giants and New England are interested in moving out of there and he's there, then it's worth your thought. But you brought up some interesting names too that you would move up with. It's funny how Genty might be the best player in this draft and nobody's interested in trading up for him.
Well, I think that people would. You're right, and honestly, I know you and I would. I know we
Sure.
would because we think he's that darn good. But at this point, I don't think he's getting to you. You might have to.
See, that's what I'm
if you want
saying.
him bad enough, you're probably going to have to be aggressive.
Yeah, the media scouts just immediately said Dallas needs a runner, which they're absolutely right. Dallas needs a runner. Dallas needs a corner. Dallas needs a receiver. Dallas needs a defensive tackle. A lot of things that Dallas needs. But they talk about the running game here. And the one way they've addressed the running game is through their coaching staff. Have they really addressed the running game with the players they've signed? No. They haven't. Williams could be a really good third down, throw it to and let block guy, but they really haven't. Miles Sanders. No, there's players in the third, fourth round that are better than Miles Sanders. So they've addressed the running situation, through the coaching staff. They haven't done it with the players. I don't think they have.
No, and if you want a guy that's going to be an impact player and immediately fix that. Ashton Genty's doing that for you.
There's possibilities going up. There are just ahead of you, and it's not like you're going from 23 to 4. You're going from 12 to 4 or 12 to 5. That's a reasonable move for a team.
And it might be one where you're getting the most bargain for it to jump up, because this is one where you're not having to give up a future one. Maybe it's just a 2 this year. So something to look into.
A 2 in next year's 3 if you want to maybe go to New England. If you want to go to Jacksonville at 5, if they're interested in bailing, you're looking at a 2 and maybe one of your 5s this year. And then you got your guy.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Brian, it's time for the Dean Julia mailbag. I want to get to this question from Cowboy Chuck because he said, unfortunately,
I answered it on Twitter.
You did. Okay, this is good. Now, I just specifically wanted to, get it in for him here because he did say that I guess we haven't really addressed it. But do you think the scouting department's metric standards are the reason they miss out on good players that other teams snatch up every year? Is it time to recycle the standards or get scouts with the fresh view? Now, I'm not exactly 100% sure on all of the standards. It does seem like, just from what we hear, the measurables on the size, the length, when it comes to arm length, for offensive linemen, hey, if you don't have a certain length arms, you can't be a tackle for me. We're going to have to kick you inside. If your arm length isn't X, if you're not certain height, weight, speed at corner, we might not be interested in you. That's why Ajay Barron, we don't think is the Cowboys' cup of tea, probably as high as 12. They might prefer a bigger corner. Maybe that's Will Johnson from Michigan. But what are your thoughts on some of these? And do you adjust it over time, or just kind of stick, hey, this is our rule book here and we're not going to waver?
Well, there's things that you absolutely put in concrete that they believe in, and you try. But the adjustments are made are with coaching staffs. There are staffs that will play with a short corner. There are staffs that will play with a long corner. There are staffs that will play with a short wide receiver. There are staffs that will play with tall guys only. You adjust your evaluations and your board to your coaching staff. We haven't had in 5 years. It's been 5 years since we've had a new coach here. So the standards that we look at could fluctuate. Eberflus could say, I need this at linebacker. I need this at corner. Mike Zimmer did the same thing. Dan Quinn did the same thing. You adjust your parameters as your coaching staff. You like I say, but there are some things that you just, hey, listen, we've always believed this. But if a new coach comes in and says, well, wait a minute, I've had 3 All-Pros playing with these types of guys, you'll adjust for your coach.
Thomas Wasson asking, do you think R.J. Harvey is available by the 3rd round, and would he immediately be the starting running back?
Yeah, absolutely. Harvey's a hell of a player. I know you like him as well. He's explosive. You watch him miss. He makes tacklers miss. He's great around the goal line. He's tough. He catches the ball. Yeah, Harvey in the 3rd round. There's a lot of really good guys you could probably consider if you don't address this thing at 1, 2, 3rd round. I could take this thing all the way into the 5th. But if you give me a shot at one of my 3rd round guys, I'd feel really, really good about that group.
Kofax wants to know, weird question. I know a team wants to pick the best players, but why would they pick an offensive tackle to replace Guyton rather than filling a hole at wide receiver 2 or running back? They've heard a number of people wanting, say, Simmons from Ohio State or Will Campbell from your LSU Tigers. Well.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think Simmons is one of the best players in this draft, and I know somebody sent me on Twitter a whole thing about him at Ohio State, and he's a terrible person, and he's hard to deal with, and going on and on. And I don't know what's created. I don't know what's true. I know there was some things that some people said, hey, you need to check on this. Didn't seem like anything terminal. You and I just watched the tape. We don't have access. I mean, I'm fortunate I have access to my gang of 7 and ask them questions about, hey, I asked people about Lacey from LSU. I'm like, hey, the wide receiver. I say, what's the situation? And they're like, listen, he's not on our board. And I think there's a lot of teams that are like that. So with Simmons, but in this day and age, I don't know if information is generated, created in a way to paint a player negatively when that's not the case, or it could very well be true. Now we have to figure out those kinds of things. But the offensive tackle, Campbell, Simmons, sure, absolutely. The one position that tends not to bust is offensive lineman, unless you're getting picked by the New York Giants. Then it tends to be a busty position.
It sure does.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, throw the resources on the line of scrimmage.
Sure.
Did Tyler Guy do anything for you last year? Now, they're not going to quit on the kid. They shouldn't, right? There's a lot of talent to work with there. He needs to play football.
New coaches.
Yeah, new coaches, sure. and have that be a competition. So if you do have a player that is clearly a top 5 and he's there at 12 for you, I don't care that you just took Tyler Guyton last year, and maybe it's a Lyle Collins type of thing where, hey, we're going to play one at right guard, and if things don't work out, we'll kick you back out to tackle. There's tons of things you can do, but I think where you get into trouble and where they have gotten into trouble is when it's like, man, we'd kind of like to get a defensive tackle here. Let me stand on the table for Mozzie. We've got to go ahead and reach on an edge. Let's go get Taco Charlton because he puts his hand in the ground, and we're not sure if TJ Watt can do that.
All well said.
That's where it ends up being a little bit of a problem for you. Okay, last one here, Brian. Before we get out of here, let's go with. We've got our friend Kurt at Showtime_32. Would you take Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State if Tet is gone at 12? And I guess the question here would be is Matthew Golden also there?
Yeah,
I think that would be an incredible debate to listen to.
Yeah, I think that to me, you obviously have some really good intelligence on what they think of Egbuka, and I have some intelligence on what they think of Golden. So we're somewhere probably in between there. Me personally, I have Egbuka as, say, player 15. I would have Golden as, say, player 18.
Okay.
That close. It's that close.
Right there.
If you have 15 players in the first round, which I do, Egbuka is going to be 14 or 15 probably on my stack. If I do the second round stack, Golden is probably going to be 16, 17 on my stack as I would look at it. So with that being said, I would take Egbuka over Golden myself. I would be interested to see. They might have it reverse. They might like Golden more than Egbuka. Like I said, I think that you've got some really good intelligence. You've talked to some folks about what they think about Egbuka, which I think is really good. And when you talk to other folks about Golden, they've got some things. So they might have a debate in their room when they stack that of which one goes above the other. So we'll see. You got a head coach. Maybe he's the guy that's going to break a tie on this. He's at the Texas Pro Day. He's at the Ohio State Pro Day. He up close personal to offensive players. If, we've seen before in the past, and I've lived this with coaches in the room, head coaches have broken ties before. Bill Parcells, guys like that. We've seen that happen in my experience. But we've seen Jason Garrett stand up for a guy. We've seen Mike McCarthy stand up for a guy. So this might be one of those discussions where either one of those players would be a huge help to a team that can use some help at wide receiver.
I think you're right. Golden's rising. He's been a big riser through this.
Yeah.
The one tiebreaker I heard argued for Igbuka would be the blocking aspect sets him apart.
Question. No
so if
question.
you're a team that wants to run the football, he might be the best blocking receiver, but then Golden might have, if you're projecting ahead, could end up being more of the game-breaking type of wide receiver down the line. Those two, that's going to be an interesting battle. I'd love to kind of ask teams like, hey, who do you have better between the two? Because there's going to be a lot of different opinions. Thank you so much, Brian. Another edition of Love of the Star in the books. We'll be back, I believe, Saturday. We'll have a new edition. Eric Chiafalo will slide on in for that. Thank you so much to Peyton Russell, as always. You've been listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast, and you can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, thank you, Brian Broaddus. I'm Zach Wolchuk. Hugs and hand pounds, everybody.